Two other people that I must acknowledge, because without them, I dare say I will not be here. Mr. J.I. Dada, and also the convention chairman, Reverend Hakim Oguniro. Now, these two gentlemen, Mr. Dada spent almost 2 weeks chasing my people that he wanted a meeting. Now, Mr. Dada and I had been working together for more than 10 years. And so for me, it was unusual for him to be looking for me. But when they said, he says he wants to see me in the office, I'm like, we can speak on the phone. But anyway, he shows up in my office, cheerfully accompanied by Reverend Oguniro. And I said, so what can I do for you, gentlemen? And then an invitation lands on my desk that in 9 months' time, we are having the 70th annual convention and the 12th in the series of annual lectures, and we would like you to join. Well, as I told the General Overseer this morning, if it hadn't been these three men, Mr. Lemo, Reverend Oguniro, and Mr. Dada, I'm sure I would have found a way to abscond from that invitation. But I thank them for the kindness of this invitation. Today, it's about poverty alleviation, economic development, and stability. Before I share my comments, by the way, I have a deck, but I'm not going to work through it slide by slide. I'm only going to use two slides. Thereafter, anybody who wants the complete deck should please ask the organizing committee. But can I crave the indulgence of those doing the projection to share my first slide? I want you to take a look at this, and I will give you 2 minutes for you just to think about it. What do you see? What do you see? Is there anybody who wishes to offer any comment? No, Oga, you can't. At least I have the mic today. You're on your own. Is there anybody, a lady perhaps, who wants to share a comment? Sorry? Nobody? Oh, yeah. Yes, madam.
Hold on. They'll give you a mic. Prof, you can go back.
Okay.
Can you put the slide back up, please? So what's your comment, madam?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I can see that at the beginning of the graphical illustration, Nigeria and China were started at the same time, and as the years moved by, around 1968 till about 1992, we were ahead, and sometime around 92, 95, China skyrocketed, and they were going as high as 14,000 US dollars.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, how many people in this audience are younger than 32 years old or 33 years old? How many people in this audience are younger than 33? The saxophonist was, that young man has to be younger than 33. Okay.
Prof, you have a whole lot of them behind me here. If you look to your right, they're here. Can you guys rise?
Okay.
The next gen.
Now, I draw your attention to this. Can you show the second slide? These are the two slides that form my context. Look at poverty. The head count in China was bigger than in Nigeria. The number of poor people, certainly until about 1996. Indeed, yes, until about 1996, the number of poor people in China was more than the number of poor people in Nigeria. I've shown you two graphics. The first shows a country that we were at par with until about 1992, leaving us far behind. Today, and for the number of years past, Nigeria has struggled to attain to $2,000 per head of income. China today is north of $12,000. I would like you to let that sink in, because it tells you what they have achieved over the last 3 decades. I will come back to this, especially as I begin to reflect on what next for Nigeria, in my own opinion. When I saw the title of this, of the theme of this convention, poverty reduction, development, and stability of the economy, I thought to myself, there's a problem here. Because if you read that title as written, it suggests a sequence, potentially running from poverty alleviation through to development, through to... I'm afraid I've been since 1989. That's not the sequence. The sequence is stability, development, poverty alleviation. Let me repeat that. There is a clear sequence. Stability, development, and then poverty alleviation. And I draw your attention to that because we're at a very important juncture in Nigeria, in the conversation around Nigeria's economic future. Yes, reforms are ongoing, but one of my submissions today, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, is that we're at a juncture where probably the soft reforms have been done. It is now the more difficult reforms that we must face. And how we build a consensus around these reforms and the need for them, the imperative of their success, will determine where we go from here. You see, stability is about predictability. Indeed, there is a slide, I don't know whether they can quickly get to it, that just looks at the pattern of economic growth in Nigeria. It's been very, very volatile. Okay? It's been very, very volatile. If they show it, you'll see it. Which makes it difficult, essentially, to say what's going to happen next. And once we cannot say what's going to happen next, then where we are going to end up is where we are. One interesting you can see, it's extremely volatile. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. It's difficult. But the other piece to please note from this particular graph is that, yes, we are growing. The growth is volatile. The growth is not consistent and sustained. For Nigeria to make progress, our growth must be, one, rapid. And for me, rapidity means 2x minimum, 2x population. In other words, we must be growing at least twice as fast as population. But you know what is ironic? We have no clear sense of the size of our population or the rate at which it grows. Everybody makes their own assumptions. Indeed, I feel very sorry for people like His Excellency the Governor, that when they say, how many people are in your state? Believe me, whatever figure, and forgive me, Your Excellency, whatever figure the governor provides is at best an estimate. I will not say a guesstimate, certainly at best an estimate. That's a real problem. So if you need growth, 2x of population, you can begin to see where we are. So if we were to take Nigeria and say, on assumption, 3.2% growth annually, then it means we need this economy to be growing by about 6.5% on a continuing basis, probably for about a decade. But let me also quickly draw your attention to a couple of other things, because this is me dealing with our reality. I asked my team in the office to please take a look at the characteristics of the economy in Nigeria and tell me what strikes them the most. And guess what they showed me that even I wasn't prepared for? They showed me that in Nigeria's economy, investment is counterintuitively related to growth. What do I mean? Normally, an increase in investment should raise growth. However, the data for Nigeria suggests that there's still work to be done. But the data, as we've looked at it, suggests that an increase in investment does not stimulate growth. At that point, as an economist, as they say, I weak. No, because I'd spent 30 years teaching that investment is positively related to growth. But guess what that also says to me? Because we have to be able to interrogate and interpret. At the first, it says at least two things to me. The first thing that it says to me is that all those things we are counting as investment are not driving growth. Let me repeat that. All what we are counting as investment is not driving growth. It is either that or it is that the level at which we are investing is not high enough, has not hit the threshold that it must in order to stimulate growth. Believe me, ladies and gentlemen, neither of these two explanations is pleasant. But why do I highlight it? Remember my point earlier. We are in the middle of a season of reform. We must avoid the mistakes of the past. Let me repeat that. We must avoid the mistakes of the past. If we say this is investment, then it's got to be the kind of investment that stimulates, supports, and drives development. Because if it doesn't, then we will remain where we are. Let me go back. I looked at 3 industrial revolutions. This is the 4th. Industrial Revolution number 1, the British were the beneficiaries of that. It took them roughly 70, 80 years to really be successful, to become, they started with textiles and they ended up with industry. Industrial Revolution number 2, the principal beneficiaries were the Americans. It took them somewhere around about 50 years The third industrial revolution, that which precedes the industrial revolution ongoing now, were essentially the Asians. It took them 30 years, China in particular, it took her 30 years to go from $1,000 per head income to $10,000 per head. The question has then got to be, if, and this is the positive spin, this is the positive piece for me, that when you look at what is going on, the period that it takes to develop, the period that it takes to transform is shortening. Because there's a school of thought, and I mustn't forget to, draw your attention to it, that says, why are countries like Nigeria bothering? After all, you're only 60 years. Look, it took the Americans 200 years. It took the British X number of years, and so on and so forth. The challenge is of a different nature today. I remember my late father used to say that it used to take them 5 weeks when he was a student in the 1930s to send news home and for it to be received. Today, we all sit and watch the Premier League as it is going on. That is the nature of transformation that the world has wrought. That is the kind of transformation that will stimulate impatience, because we can all see others doing it. It's very important, because when I look at Nigeria's numbers, what is clear to me are a couple of things. In terms of our reality, sorry, can you see if you can find the slide around our economic progress and the share of industry, agriculture, and services? If you can find it. And the reason I call for that, yes, thank you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, look at this. I have it going back to the 1960s, by the way, but we just chose to do this. In the 1960s, agriculture was about 60%. By the time we got to the 1970s, after the Civil War, up until about the beginning of the 1980s, industry was 60%. But look at where we are today. We are in a place where things are difficult. Why do I say so? Look, the blue line, or the blue column, this is agriculture. Standard development theory suggests that labor moves from agriculture into higher value industry. What we are seeing is a Nigeria that is deindustrializing. There's no, you see, my approach to today's conversation is not to say the last 4 years. No, I am looking at it from the last 60 years. Where we are today is the culmination of what we have done over the last 60 years. It doesn't matter, it's Buhari, yes, I was his economic advisor, it's Obasanjo. There are a couple of things that I would like to draw your attention to. This is the first, that as an economy, we are deindustrializing. Because we are deindustrializing, services is now more than half of our economy. But guess what is the problem with these services? We are not talking about services that are supporting industry. We are talking essentially about services where people drop out from the formal economy and drop into. So we've got a service sector where the jobs are vulnerable, the productivity is low, and therefore, essentially, a lot of working poor. Let me make that point. A lot of working poor. So this is the third thing I'm giving you. The first thing I said was, remember, investment is not generating growth. Secondly, we've just seen a scenario where we are deindustrializing. Thirdly, because of the size of the service sector. What we have today is a situation where 93% of Nigeria's labor force is in the informal sector. Only 7% of the labor force is in the waged formal sector. Now, once you sit there, now you can begin to feel sorry for my governor. Why? Because in the informal sector, where are they supposed to raise monies from? It becomes a problem. People say, oh, we don't like the government borrowing. We don't want to pay taxes. If we pay taxes, they don't used to use it for what we used to send them to do. We don't want to pay levies either. Omo, magicians get to begin work. But it's not even just that magicians. The fact of the structure of the current structure of the economy creates a problem. Now, sorry, can you please go back to that slide again? Yes, just one thing before I move on. One of the things that I chose to do is also to put this here. A division between formality and informality. Yes, I've made the argument. When you see the overall figure, the formal sector of the economy is growing. It's actually bigger than the informal sector. But you know where the problem is? The problem is this. Agriculture is almost 29% of our economy. It is 95% informal. The second largest sector in this economy is trade. It is 40% informal. The third largest is Akim and his people, real estate. They are 57% informal. Now, when you look at an economy where the top 5 sectors are 80% of the economy, and you see the top 3, indeed, even manufacturing, which is largely formal, has seen its informality rise from 19 to 21%. 1/5 of Nigeria's manufacturing sector is informal. I draw your attention to all of this because that is what begins to provide some understanding, some explanation for the kind of limited progress. Please, don't get me wrong. My contention today is not that Nigeria has made no progress. Don't misunderstand me. My contention today is that Nigeria's progress has been limited, and that in this season of reform, if we are going to really drive this economy such that people really can live, we must avoid the mistakes of the past. What then do I want to say beyond that? I started this presentation by looking at China. Permit me, I would like to return to China. I've never been to China, but who knows? China had what they call the century of humiliation. The century of humiliation. What was their humiliation? They felt they were unjustly treated. That the Japanese, all sorts of treaties that they signed, that imagine, they lost about 35 million people in a war because they were not good enough. They felt that their trading arrangements were disadvantageous to them. Because of that century of humiliation, a group of Chinese leaders essentially took a retreat and came to a conclusion that never again. Now, when they came to the conclusion never again, it didn't immediately translate. It took time. But they came to the conclusion never again. They determined some minimum, irreducible minimum outcomes that they must achieve. But what is also very interesting in my view of the world is that, the Chinese, yes, we know the Communist Party, its political system, but guess what? The Chinese leadership were clear about a couple of things. They set the the direction. They set the targets. But they enabled local officials to determine how best whatever they were doing would yield to support the targets that they were running. Why do I draw your attention to this, ladies and gentlemen? I draw your attention because for me, there are at least two learnings. There may be more. If you go and read the book, there's a book by Yuan Ang, How China Escaped the Poverty Trap. I think you'll find it interesting. There are two things that I picked up. The first is this whole idea of irreducible minimum outperformance. You know, Nigeria has been writing plan since 1962. I'm told we've written about 40. Well, guess what? If we had lived up to all those plans, today, Nigeria would be chasing $2 trillion economy. Imagine $2 trillion compared to where we are today. But as I said, I diverge. My learnings are two. One, what is the irreducible minimum that leadership will hold itself to account for? Because without that, we've got a problem. But the second thing is how they incentivize, despite being a communist government, how they incentivized the provinces to contribute into achieving the objectives that have been set. In Nigeria, one of the key weaknesses, I think, of our federation is that the federation tends to clap with one hand. And by the way, I'm not the original author of that statement. Anybody who knows Charles Soludo will remember Charles saying, we need to clap with two hands. What do I mean by clapping with two hands? Yes, there is an exclusive list, there is a concurrent list. But there has to be a sync between all of these. Or else, the states and local governments go one way, the federal may find itself going in another. And once it is like that, we lose time. You now begin to understand why investment doesn't seem to be generating growth. By the way, I'm sure some of you have seen the Chatham House report on corruption. I think it's something that we now need to pay some attention to. Not because I am saying, oh, Nigeria is the most corrupt country in the world, But as an economist, I begin to understand, especially when I see counterintuitive results, such as investment not driving output. Then I have to start asking why. There are two reasons. Number one, I already gave you some, but there's two things I want to again draw attention to. The first is, well, maybe we are misapplying stuff. But the second, and I don't know if my guys can quickly find me my graph on exchange rates. In my book, or in my view, if you think of steps, that's how Nigeria has until recently run high exchange rates. You hold it. When you can't afford to hold it again, external circumstances defeat you, you drop it. Then you pick it up again. Then you hold it again. And then again, external circumstances defeat you, then you drop it again. Guess what the problem that raises? Remember the point about stability and predictability. If I have no sense as an investor of what's going to happen next to your exchange rate, why should I bring my money to you? Indeed, one of the most successful pieces that Nigeria has had is her ability to attract foreign portfolio investment. Why? Yeah, because we have typically raised interest rates to levels that make it attractive for foreign investors who only buy financial instruments and leave at the first sign of trouble, as opposed to long-term investors who build factories and invest in people. And so for me, the key challenges that we face, especially many of us here, is Nigeria needs to have a clarity. what is the role of exchange rate? Do we want a strong currency? Oh no, I'm an economist, and I understand these things. A strong currency helps you to manage your inflation down. But in my own judgment, Nigeria's exchange rate strategy should be one that enables Nigeria to be globally competitive. Look, there's no point strengthening your exchange rate. Guess what you've done? You disadvantage your exports, you advantage your imports, and disadvantage your domestic producers. Now, if I cannot predict what you are going to do next, why do I bring my money? But not just that. If I cannot predict what you are going to do next, even as a domestic player, why do I keep my money here? Go and look at the numbers, this size of domiciliary account balances within the banking system. It's legitimate, so there's nothing illegitimate about it. But the point is that foreign currency has become a risk management tool even at retail levels. It's no longer, now I'm going to look for trouble. It's no longer people like Akim. That one I can hold. He's my aburo, so not to spoil. There are one or two people I want to mention, but as I'm seeing the second row behind them, I suspect that where I will sleep tonight is not sure. But the point is this. Currency holdings, foreign currency. At one point, Nigeria was the second largest importer of dollars in the world. Now, all of these speak to things. But let me now move to what I think must happen next. Remember I said the Chinese, a century of humiliation, stimulated some reflection. So question is this. Yes, I know. Chapter 2 of the Constitution is very clear about the object of governance. But some say it is not justiciable. Maybe. I'm not a lawyer. But can we as a society come to some appreciation of minimum standards of delivery? My dear father died in June this year. He was 97, so me, I have no... It was a blessing beyond what I could imagine. But one of the things that I learned from him, he used to have a coterie of friends. And guess what they used to do? They would put money together and go and be looking for a school that has no roof. They will put money together and go and be looking for children who have no shoes. And one of the things that raises in me is that, perhaps the time has arrived where the role of government now needs a review. His Excellency made a very valid point. The government is not going to be able to do it on its own. Let me draw your attention to two things. The Infrastructure Master Plan for Nigeria, revised in 2020, requires Nigeria to spend $100 billion every year for 20 years. $100 billion every year for 20 years. I haven't spoken about our Industrial Revolution Master Plan. Why do I draw this attention? For two reasons. There is now need for a conversation around the role of government, the role of the private sector. How do we crowd in private money meaningfully? The government is not going to be able to do it, with the best will in the world. And so if that is the case, how do we crowd in private sector investment? When you look at the out-of-school children, when you look at the number of doctors per 1,000 people in Nigeria, all of this simply tell you the imperative of some serious investment. So, what do I propose? The last thing that I'm going to propose is going to get me in trouble, so I'll leave it to the end. The first thing that I think needs some reflection on is data. If you cannot measure it, you ain't going to manage it. Let me repeat. If you cannot measure it, you ain't going to manage it. And therefore, my view becomes that the Bureau of Statistics of Nigeria needs to be strengthened. It needs to be better resourced, and I wouldn't be averse to seeing it being independent. However, if it is going to get to be independent, essentially something in the line of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank should have to be installed in the Bureau of Statistics. A technical team or a technical oversight board of economists, statisticians, blah, 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 technocrats who oversee the work of the Bureau of Statistics. Because sometimes, for all the good work they do, once in a while, a glitch here, a glitch there, and these glitches tend to undermine. So that's the first thing. It is imperative that data, we must treasure it, we must ask for it. The second thing, if Nigeria is going to progress meaningfully, it also now becomes very, very important that productivity must be at the heart of everything we do. The data around productivity for Nigeria is only in one direction, downwards. Our economy is not as productive as it can and it needs to be. And you know, one of the nice things about this economy, I gave you a fact earlier. I said the top 6 sectors are 80% of this economy. And which are the top 6? It's not very hard now. Agriculture is almost 30%. Trading is next in line. Real estate is number 3. Before you come to number 4, which is manufacturing. By the way, oil and gas, which we used to look at, is actually now relegated. Now, these sectors, 80%, what does that quickly say to you? You know what? If I focus on these sectors, I can actually very quickly stimulate productivity and enable growth. Let me take one in particular, agriculture. That's the largest single sector of the economy, almost 29%. Guess what? 80% smallholder farmer content. I keep feeling sorry for the Minister of Agric at the federal level. I feel sorry for the commissioners of Agric at state level. Why do I say this? The farmer doesn't belong to either the federal government or the state government. What belongs? States own the land. That's about it. And one of the things I think is now imperative, Nigeria has 4 seasons in a year. My view is we haven't maximized that opportunity to renew food supply on an ongoing basis. What would I then like to see? I'm not one of those who would say, oh, let us create farmer cooperatives and all of that. Ain't gonna work. Simple reason, not because they couldn't work, but because the farmers are unable to hire the kind of capacity that will manage the cooperative and pay it. Therefore, I would like to suggest that perhaps the time is now for farmer aggregation, not output aggregation, farmer aggregation. There are companies like Apex, Babangona, Farm Crowdy. You can name some of these. I think the time has come to have an incentive structure that enables these guys, aggregate farmers. What they then do is that because the farmers, quote unquote, and forgive my language, please, belong to them, they will service the farmer, ranging from inputs, extension service, finance. They can go to the bank and borrow and on lend to farmers. Look, one of the things that we must always understand, I've never been a banker, and even though the introduction was that I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Bankers, I am, but I've never been a banker. Don't ask why. But the point is this, that the various banking regulations, Basel 1, 2, 3, they were not by us. They were for other economies. Ours was to domesticate and apply. I remember going to the States, and I followed a friend. They said they were going on farm visit. So I followed them. Jobless now. I followed them. We drove. I beg, when will we be reaching this farm? Oh, we passed its outpost 1 kilometer away. You say what? That we have driven 1 kilometer and we're in the farm. Okay. Now you can see why a farm in the US can borrow. A smallholder in Nigeria playing with less than 3 hectares, who's going to lend to them? And so we need to begin to rethink, retweak some of the agreements, some of the structures to make them work for us. Human capital development, I've never understood. Today, we talk of $1 trillion economy. And by the way, it is doable. I got my team to do a macro projection of how much growth, blah, blah, blah. It's doable. But you know what these macro things don't tell you? Forgive me, how many engineers do we need to deliver $1 trillion economy? How many do we have? How quickly do you produce it? We used to have a manpower board, and this now takes me to my second point. Remember I said data. The second point is about planning. One of the key regrets that I have as I look and study data is that Nigeria has written plenty plans. But guess what? We seldom implement them. Remember I told you earlier, if we had implemented all them plans, we would be heading in the direction of a $2 trillion economy, not a $1 trillion economy. And so, we have to begin to ask, does the budget at all levels, do the budgets at all levels reflect a commitment to the plans that we say we have written? Because if they don't, then you cannot expect to sow rice and come and be carrying cassava. How? And this, for me, is one of our biggest challenges. What else would I like to suggest? We have to address our key pain points. Food, I have already addressed. Energy becomes our second big key pain point. Look at the numbers. Our national grid today wields probably about 6 gigawatts. The global standard is 1 gigawatt of power per million people. That's my understanding. So even if I don't know how many people there are in Nigeria, even if I make an assumption, conservative, that 170 million people, some say it's 230, some say there are all sorts of numbers flying around. 1 gigawatt per million people means 170 gigawatts. We are willing our installed capacity on the GENCO side is sub 20 gig. All your generators, from my better past my neighbor to the most sophisticated, the estimate I have seen suggests it's about 50 gigawatts. So what all of this is saying is that you're talking of about 70 gigawatts of power in an economy that needs more than double that. How do we want to grow industry in the absence of energy security and be competitive? For me, yes, the challenge around energy is to review and reform the sector again. Yes, we did that in 2012, I remember. But hey, we've seen what's happened in the last decade, 2-3 years. What it's saying, yes, the government owes, it is trying to settle. But my view is that there is a need for a new configuration of people or investors who have deep pockets, who have a clear understanding of power, and who can enable us. There is a conversation that must also be had around infrastructure. When I was a student in the 1980s, seldom did you hear of private companies venturing into infrastructure. Why? Because the financial instruments to enable it just weren't there. It were multi-year, long tenure. The instruments just hadn't evolved. Today they have. Today they have. And so we're going to have some very funny conversations. The government must build road. True. But as government no can get money now, how for do? Oh, okay, the government has money. After all, you are told that the FAC has increased and His Excellency and his brother governors are the beneficiaries of this. I mean, I've been waiting for His Excellency to call me to come and say, Hafa. But guess what? In economics, I would call that money illusion. Why? Because, yes, in nominal terms, it's gone up. But don't forget, the things they spend the money on, their costs have gone up. The exchange rate has gone up. And so by the time you reconvert, you've got a problem. And so part of the challenge is that we have to have an infrastructure understanding around where can we crowd in private sector money and what must government do. My own suggestion of what the government must do. The government must have two roles. Role number one is that the government must be a foreseer. The government must sit and foresee the future. Not only must it foresee the future, it must then enable a meaningful response to that future. But if we don't have data published on an ongoing basis, how does the government itself foresee the future? I hope you understand me. I am also very clear that the government has got to do three things. Number one, it must enable, first of all, it must create a secure environment. And a secure environment is at two levels. There is internal domestic law and order, sanctity of contracts, rule of law. And then there is the sovereign borders of the country. The second, because without a secure environment, transactions become very difficult. In fact, not just did they become difficult, but the cost of transaction rises. The second thing that the government must do is to enable her people see opportunity. And this is where education becomes critical. And this is one of the areas where I think, as I said, now I'm about to start getting into trouble. I look at governments, whether it's federal, states, whatever. Imagine, the lawyers tell us, I'm not a lawyer, so if I get it wrong, I don't have any apologies. But the lawyers tell us that you cannot be the accuser, the judge, the jury in your own matter. But in education, the government owns the school. So who is going to hold the government accountable for the quality of education that the school owned by it is delivering? One of the things that is important that we have seen from Nigeria's data is that when you look at the basket of how people spend their money, the share of people's incomes going on education has doubled. What it suggests is as follows. People understand that education is the intergenerational gate fee to success. If a family hasn't been successful, it is willing to put everything it's got into education to enable its successors to be successful. But guess what? If they then show up in government educational institutions who do not meet the standards, the question then becomes, might we not be approaching a time when what is important to do is for the government to collapse all the spending on education and use them to give bursaries and enable children and their parents to go and shop for education in places where the quality is better. Because, forgive me, it's a challenge, but we have to think differently. Beyond that, as I said, 3 things: security, human capital. And human capital is education and healthcare. Education and healthcare. If you can see opportunity, then that's education. To take advantage of the education, of the opportunity, that's health. Be unwell, you can't take advantage. And so again, we have to start asking ourselves, what is the way in which we provide education, healthcare that enables this economy to grow fast, to grow inclusively, to grow continuously? I can see that I have just 1 more minute. There are a couple of things that I would have liked to say, but let me end it on this note. Let us be clear. Development doesn't take 2 years. It doesn't take 4 years. It is a multi-year endeavor. And this is where, in my view, the current democracy may be shorting itself. Why? In a 4-year term as a chief executive, when you arrive, you spend your first 6 months, 9 months, perhaps even 1 year trying to figure out, so what have I inherited? That's minimum 6 months gone. You've got 3.5. Don't forget, anything from 18 months to 2 years to the end, you are back in election cycle. 6 months gone, 18 months. 6 months gone at the beginning, 18 at the end, 2 years gone, you're short to 2 years as your effective working time. In my view, I think it is time for consideration to be given to the term of a chief executive at all 3 levels of 1 term of 7 years. End of story. There is 1 term, 7 years. Ladies and gentlemen, my time's up. They've told me. I hope that the comments and views I have shared help in this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Doyin Salami. We'll ask that you please remain on stage. I'm sorry. I'm going to ask Dr. Salami. You're going to remain on stage. I want to do a photo session, not just 2 of us. Right? I want to ensure, because I'm sure our governor needs to leave very soon, so I want to make sure that we have captured this before he goes. Is it better that we come down, or does everybody come up here? What do you guys suggest? Photographers, up. You're going to make them walk. So it's an exercise. Please, everybody, I want everybody on this top row. The GO, our chairman, the planning committee chair, our speakers, should please come up on stage and join. Can you move the podium, please? Thank you very much. So you will be standing right next. I can take this so that your hands are free, correct? So please, we want to capture this for posterity. 1 tenure, 7 years. Maybe, he said he will say it last. It's all this going back to vote and not vote. Who knows whether that's where our problems come from? Because a poor man doesn't know anything about voting. What's important is his stomach right now. For as long as there's poverty, madam, just follow the instructions and directions of the, thank you very much. So I can capture this for posterity. Are we good, photographers? Arrange the way you want it done. Okay. No, Pastor Oguniro, you have to step forward a little bit. Right, that's it. Okay. Yes, these are experts. Nireti got it right. It's like, and this is Ms. Anibola. You understand the... Okay, so at the count of Christian living. When I say Christian living, you just say cheese. Christian living. Thank you. Are you good, guys? Thank you very much. So if at some point If at some point our governor leaves, we'll send him the message. Like Dr. Salami says, the deck is available for everybody to read. So I would like to say that our speakers should just remain on stage. Our speakers should remain on stage. Pastor Tive, Mrs. Abimbola, Pastor Ben Akabweze, and Dr. Salami himself just remain on stage. Tive, where are you going? Okay. They're going to collect what they're going to read with. Please remain on stage so that we can do what we need to do. So you can escort the governor out as he leaves. Thank you very much. Pastor Ben, do you want to collect paper too? Are you okay? Are you going to collect something from the table? Maybe you go back to your seats so that they can arrange the seats. Thank you very much. It makes more sense, actually. Where's Dr. Salami? Yes. So now I want